Welcome back to Nature Documentary for Sleep. If you enjoy this kind of late-night geography, leave a comment and consider liking and subscribing. Tonight, you're drifting toward Anak Krakatau in the Sunda Strait, where land is a temporary arrangement. It's pre-dawn, you're on a small survey boat, and the volcano is a dark cone with a thin, restless plume. When you step ashore, your boots don't find bedrock. They find warm ash and loose rubble that shifts under weight. The air carries a light sulfur bite, and the wind keeps changing its mind about where to send it. You climb anyway, timing your steps between low detonations, following a fresh lahar channel etched to the beach. Every reading says the cone is hotter than last month, and the shoreline has already been redrawn in black sand. This is why it's dangerous, not because it's tall, but because water, unstable slopes, and rising magma share the same tight space. So what happens when a volcanic flank fails into the sea, and the strait turns that collapse into a fast, shallow water wave train? You do not get an answer all at once. You get it in tiny practical warnings, the kind that arrive as inconveniences first. Your radio crackles with the voice of the lead volcanologist, calm like someone reading a grocery list. They tell you the tide window is shrinking and the squall line is building to the west. You look over your shoulder, and the sea is already changing texture, darkening in strips as wind brushes it. The boat's engine idles like it is trying not to wake anything up. You shoulder a pack that is heavier than it should be because science is mostly batteries and cables. Your job is simple, which is how dangerous jobs always start. You are here to help service a seismic station and a GPS marker before weather and ash make it impossible. You tell yourself you are walking on an island, but your boots keep reminding you this is a pile, not a place. A low detonation rolls out of the crater, and the sound arrives late, like thunder that forgot its schedule. A few pebbles tick down the slope beside you, and you watch them sink into ash like it is powdery snow. That is your first concrete escalation, the small reminder that gravity has options here. The lahar channel you are following is still sharp-edged. It is a fresh scar, darker than everything around it, and it cuts straight down to the beach. It should look dry because the air is dry and the sun is still hiding. But the channel walls steam in thin breaths, as if the ground is exhaling. You crouch, you touch a rock near the edge, and you pull your hand back fast. It is not glowing, it is not dramatic, it is just warm enough to be wrong. The team spreads out with the practiced efficiency of people who do not linger. One person carries a small shovel and sample bags. One person has a handheld thermal camera pointed like a flashlight at the slope ahead. The lead has the radio and the tone that says, "Keep moving, do not debate the volcano." You keep your eyes up because the cone is not smooth. It is made of layers, like someone dumped charcoal and sand in alternating moods. Some layers are loose ash, some are welded chunks, and some are blocks that look like they were thrown there by anger. You feel a vibration under your feet, faint, steady, and easy to mistake for your own pulse. The volcanologist calls it tremor, which is the polite word for the mountain clearing its throat. A second detonation follows, closer, and this one has a sharper crack. A small puff of ash peels off the plume and drifts sideways, then falls back over you. It lands on your sleeves as grit, and suddenly The air tastes like dirty pennies. The wind shifts again, and now you are walking in your own gray wake. You reach the first instrument site, a metal box half buried in ash, strapped to a stake that looks too skinny for its job. You kneel. You brush ash away from the latch, and the ash slides like flour. The box is warm, not hot, not sizzling, just warm enough that you realize the ground is feeding it heat all day and all night. Inside, the data logger blinks, stubborn and loyal. The batteries are swollen slightly, and the cable leading into the ground has new abrasions. Something has been rubbing it. You follow the cable with your eyes, and you see why. The surface has moved since last month, inching downhill, tugging everything with it. The island is creeping. Not in a horror movie way, in a boring geological way. It is the same motion as a slow spill, a granular slope that never really settles. You report it into the radio, because small movements become large stories later. The lead answers with a single word, acknowledged, and you hear them swallow. You know what they are thinking, because you are thinking it too. Unstable slopes are not a side note on volcanic islands. They are the whole plot. You stand, and you look down toward the beach. Your footprints already look softer at the edges. Ash is sliding back into them, erasing you while you are still here. You walk on, following the planned route toward the next station. The sky brightens from black to deep blue, and the cone becomes more detailed, more honest. You can see streaks where rain has carved gullies. You can see boulders frozen mid-roll, like they got tired and stopped. And you can see something that was not on the photos from last week. A narrow crack angled across the slope, not wide enough to swallow you, but long enough to make you stop. It is a seam in the ash, a thin shadow line that runs toward the southwest flank. The thermal camera catches it and paints it slightly warmer than the ash around it. Warm cracks are not comforting. Warm cracks mean gas, and gas means pressure, and pressure means decisions. The lead comes up beside you, and they do not touch the crack. They just stare at it, the way you stare at a bruise you did not notice yesterday. They speak into the radio, asking the boat to confirm position and readiness. The boat captain replies, and the answer is not what you want. Fishing traffic is nearby. You can see it too, little lights far out, bobbing in the Strait. They are early, running nets before the sea gets rough. People working the water like it is a dependable floor. You realize, with a small cold twist, that if something happens here, it will not just be you. The lead turns to the team, and you hear the decision form before they say it. We go higher to relocate the sensor cable away from the active gully. Then, we finish the GPS marker quickly. Then, we leave. It is a good plan, which is another way of saying it will be tested. You nod, because nodding is easier than arguing with the volcano. You angle your climb toward an older ridge, where the material looks darker and more compact. Your boots still sink, but less, and you can feel firmer resistance beneath the ash. The ridge is not safe. It is just less eager to move. The detonations continue, spaced out like a heartbeat, with mild arrhythmia. Each one sends a shiver through the ground and a small rain of grit down the slope. You keep timing your steps between them, not because it matters, but because it makes you feel in control. The sun finally crests low enough to make the ash sparkle. It is beautiful. in a cheap way. It looks like someone sprinkled glitter over a disaster. You reach a ledge that the team calls safe, which is an optimistic term. It is simply higher, with less loose debris above it. From here, you can see the Sunda Strait open up, Java on one side, Sumatra on the other, both of them green and densely lived in. Between them, the water runs hard, the tide ripping like it has somewhere urgent to be. The current lines are visible now, long streaks where foam and floating pumice collect. It looks like a conveyor belt, and that is exactly what it is. This strait moves heat and debris with the patience of a machine. You watch the water and you notice how close everything is. It is not a wide ocean out here. It is a corridor, a shortcut between seas, a funnel between islands, a place where waves have nowhere to spread out. You hear the hiss of surf below, and it does not sound normal. It is sharper, like water hitting something that does not want to be wet. You look down, and you see small wisps of steam, where waves lick fresh deposits. Hot ash meets seawater. They do not mix politely. They argue, and the argument is audible. You feel a kind of uncomfortable respect. This volcano is not just erupting into air. It is erupting into water, or at least next to it, which is almost the same thing. Coastal volcanoes have a special talent for surprises. Seawater is not passive. It infiltrates cracks. It floods hot pores. It turns to steam fast, expanding like a cheap party trick with lethal consequences. A phreatic explosion. The scientists call it, you translate it into human. A sudden steam blast with no warning because water touched something too hot. The team starts working on the instrument relocation. You help unspool cable, your gloves instantly coated in ash. The cable wants to kink, because cables always want to be difficult at the worst times. You anchor it with metal stakes driven into tephra. Tephra is the polite word for volcanic junk, ash, and lapilli, and broken rock. Driving stakes into it feels like trying to secure a tent in flour. Each strike of the hammer sends a small puff of ash into your face. You blink, grit out of your eyes, and you keep going. You glance up at the summit plume every few seconds. It is thin, but it is constant, a signal that something down there is still feeding it. The lead calls for a final check on the seismometer. A small device, buried and listening, measuring the planet's quiet violence. The screen shows steady tremor, not spiking, but not calming either. You are not comforted. You have learned that stable unrest is still unrest. A sudden pop interrupts your thoughts. It is not loud like the earlier detonations. It is close, sharp, like someone snapping a thick branch. A fist-sized clast, a chunk of rock lands a few meters away and half buries itself in ash. Then another. Then a scatter of gravel. You duck instinctively, too late to matter, because gravity does not care about your reflexes. The team freezes for a breath. The lead scans the slope above, eyes tracking for movement. Nothing dramatic follows. No plume surge, no fireworks show. Just a reminder. This place can weaponize seawater and loose rock with almost no effort. The lead speaks quietly, more to themselves than to you. That was phreatic, they say. Small, shallow, but it means water is in the system. And water in the system means the volcano can change the rules whenever it wants. You nod again. You keep working because stopping does not make you safer. You finish anchoring the cable and you tuck the slack into a shallow trench. The ash collapses back over it like it is trying to hide the evidence. You stand and the world feels suddenly brighter. The sun is up enough now to illuminate the cone properly. In full daylight, Anak Krakatau looks almost reasonable. Walkable, like a difficult hike, not an active construction site for new land. That is when you catch yourself making the mistake, trusting what you see. You take a long look across the strait again, and the human reality slides into focus. There are villages on both sides, ports, beach resorts, families making breakfast, a long coastline that treats the sea like background noise. They are close enough that you could reach them in a small boat, close enough that a wave could reach them faster than a warning. Your radio crackles again. The boat captain says the wind is shifting. The swell is building. If the team wants pickup on the beach, the window is getting narrower. The lead turns and you can hear the calculation. Finish the GPS marker and then start down. No extra samples. No scenic detours. You shoulder your pack again and you start traversing the outer slope. The ash here is deeper, drier, and each step slides back half a foot. It is like climbing a sand dune that hates you personally. The GPS marker is a small pole with a receiver placed to track deformation. Because this island does not just erupt, it swells. It bulges like a body holding its breath. GPS can catch those tiny changes, the slow inhale before an exhale. You reach the marker and you kneel to check the housing. The plastic casing is coated in ash and salt spray. You wipe it with your sleeve and the ash smears into a gray paste. The device beeps, healthy, but the pole is not straight. It leans slightly down slope. Not much, just enough to say, the ground beneath it is shifting. You tighten a bracket, you log the angle, and you feel a dull rumble in your teeth. It is not sound, not exactly. It is vibration, traveling through ash, through bone, through the small spaces in your jaw. You look up, a line of fumaroles, small vents, has appeared along that same crack you saw earlier. Little breath holes, exhaling steam and gas in a row. Not a single vent. A line. That detail matters. Lines mean structure. Lines mean a fracture, a weakness, a place where the volcano is pulling itself apart. The lead sees it too, and their face tightens. They do not say panic words. They say practical words. We move, they say. Now. You do not argue. You stand and you start moving laterally, aiming for older, darker rock again. The idea is simple. If a slope fails, you do not want to be on it. You want to be beside it, or above it, or anywhere else. Your boots slide, and you catch yourself with your hands. Ash fills your palms. It is warm. You hate that it is warm. You keep moving, and the rumble continues, steady as a distant engine. Then the slope gives a small shrug. A slab of ash and blocks shears away downhill, maybe the size of a room. It does not roar like a movie. It makes a short, ugly rushing sound, and then it is gone, sliding into the gully. It exposes darker material beneath. damp-looking, steaming faintly, the inside of the cone briefly revealed. A layered history of eruptions, each one a thin page of violence. You watch it for 1 extra second because your brain wants to record it. Then you force yourself to move because recording is not surviving. The lead radios the boat again, voice still controlled. They tell the captain to hold off the beach, engines ready. They give coordinates because coordinates are the only thing that travel cleanly through fear. You continue traversing, the team bunching closer together now. Not because being together helps against collapse, it does not, but because humans herd when nervous, even smart ones. The wind drops and the air goes still. The sulfur smell intensifies without the breeze to dilute it. You can hear the surf more clearly now. You can hear tiny trickles of ash shifting under your own feet. You can hear your breathing. The quiet feels wrong. It is the kind of quiet that comes before weather or before something breaks. You reach the higher ridge again and you stop just long enough to look back. The crack line is more visible in daylight. A thin curve across the slope with steam venting along sections of it. The fumaroles are not dramatic jets. They are small, persistent breaths, but they are aligned like a smile that does not mean kindness. The thermal camera paints a warmer streak beneath the surface. The lead mutters numbers, tremor amplitude, gas readings, temperature anomalies. Not eruption now, their tone implies, but change. The kind of steady, grinding unrest that means the plumbing is reorganizing. You feel the urge to leave immediately. You also feel the responsibility because instruments left half secured become junk, and junk on an active slope becomes debris in a future wave. So you make a choice. You and the lead decide to finish securing the relocated cable on the ridge. Fast. Then you descend directly. No loop back toward the gully. You hammer the last stake in, and the tephra accepts it like a favor it will revoke later. You tug the cable once, hard, testing the bite. It holds, for now, and that is the best promise this island ever makes. You feel another tremor in your soles, not stronger, just more certain. It is the difference between a washing machine wobble and a washing machine that has decided to walk. The lead makes a small gesture, 2 fingers down the slope, and the team starts moving. You take the direct line toward the beach because the shortest route is also the least time spent here. Your boots slide and your calves start to burn because ash is an exercise in humiliation. Every step forward is half a step back, and the volcano watches you negotiate with gravity. The wind is still gone. The plume rises straight up, thin and patient, like a cigarette in a room where no one admits they smoke. You keep glancing at the crack line because your brain insists on monitoring betrayal. The fumaroles along it have a new rhythm, not louder, more frequent, like someone tapping their fingers on a table faster while pretending they are calm. You reach a patch of older rock, darker and more compact, and it feels like stepping onto a different planet. Your footing stabilizes, and your shoulders loosen by a fraction. Congratulations! You have found something almost solid on a volcano built of rearranged fragments. From this firmer rib of rock, you can look down into the gully you avoided. The Lahar Channel is still there, a dark scar to the sea, but it looks different now. The edges seem sharper, and the bottom seems smoother, as if something has already sifted through. You tell yourself it is the light. You tell yourself it is your nerves inventing patterns. Then a pebble dislodges uphill and rolls. It does not bounce like rock on rock. It sinks and vanishes into ash, leaving only a faint line behind it. The slope is behaving like a fluid that forgot how to flow. The lead's radio hisses, and you hear the boat captain again. They say the nearshore chop is building, even though the wind on the island is dead. That is the Strait for you. It can be calm above and violent below, like a mood swing with geography. The captain says they can wait offshore, but not too long. If the swell steepens, landing a small boat on black sand becomes a coin toss. You are not comforted by any plan that involves coins. You descend faster, staying on the rib, then cutting across. You keep your weight forward so your heels do not dig and trigger little slides. You are walking the way you walk on ice, except the ice is warm and it hates being stable. A low detonation comes from the crater, duller than before. It is more like a chest cough than a crack. The plume thickens slightly, and ash grains begin to fall again. They land on your eyelashes and melt into little dark smears of sweat. You wipe your face, and your glove leaves a gray streak across your cheek. You look like the island has marked you as property. The scientist behind you, the one with the thermal camera, pauses and tilts it down slope. They say one word that makes your stomach tighten. Hot. Not everywhere, just in a band. A warm stripe beneath the surface, angled toward the southwest flank. It is the same direction as the crack. Warm stripes in ash are not a trivia fact. They are plumbing. They are pathways where gas and heat are moving, choosing routes, testing weaknesses. The lead asks for a quick tremor check. The seismometer feed on the handheld display flickers, then stabilizes. The line is thicker now. Not spiking, just more energetic, like the planet is humming louder. You feel the urge to interpret it like a personality. The volcano is irritated. The volcano is waking. The volcano is not a character. It is a system. And systems do not warn you out of kindness. They just reach a threshold. Your descent brings you closer to the surf, and the hissing sound grows clearer. The waves break against deposits that were not here last month. Fresh black sand and scattered pumice and small boulders that look like they were dropped from a height. The shoreline is a rough draft, and the sea keeps editing. You smell sulfur, then salt, then sulfur again. The air keeps switching sides. The lead calls out a change in plan. No beach pickup. Not yet. You will regroup on a slightly higher berm, a ridge of older debris above the tide line. The boat will wait farther out, where it can maneuver. You do not argue. You look at the beach and you see the problem. The water is surging in sets, not evenly. A wave comes in higher, drags back harder, and leaves the sand slick and unstable. A small boat would broach here in seconds, turn sideways, smashed, or pulled. So you climb the berm. It is not tall. It is just tall enough to keep your feet out of the reach of casual waves. From there, you get a wider view of the Strait. Java is a low green mass in the distance, hazy in the growing heat. Sumatra sits heavier on the other side, darker in tone, as if it has absorbed more weather. Between them, the water runs like a muscle. You can see the current lines clearly now. Long streaks of foam and scattered pumice rafts drifting fast. Those rafts are evidence. Light volcanic rock can float for months, carried like gossip from eruption to eruption. You watch a cluster of pumice spin in an eddy, then escape and shoot eastward. That is the Strait doing what it does best, taking whatever is given and delivering it to someone else. The lead begins logging observations into a waterproof notebook. Time, plume direction, wind speed, tremor, amplitude, water behavior. It sounds like bureaucracy. It is survival. Because later, when people ask what happened, you will need facts, not feelings. And speaking of facts, your mind does the thing it always does. Near Anak Krakatau, it backs into the crater of history. You cannot stand here without thinking about the parent volcano, the one that used to occupy this space before it made itself famous. You look at the horizon and you try to imagine it. Not Anak Krakatau, the child cone. Krakatau, the older, broader mass that once rose here like a proper island. It is hard because the sea has stolen the outline. It is easy to forget an island when it is underwater, but the seafloor remembers. The lead pulls out a laminated bathymetry chart, edges softened by salt and use. It shows the caldera beneath you, a drowned bowl with steep walls, a cavity in the earth filled with seawater, waiting. The chart is just lines and numbers, but you translate it into human. You are standing on the rim of a missing mountain, and the missing part is not gone. It is still here, as a void. The caldera walls drop in steps, like a stadium built for something enormous. Those steps matter because steep underwater slopes are invitations. They invite landslides, they invite slumps, they invite chunks of volcanic flank to give up and slide. When that happens, the sea does not politely make room. It gets shoved. And when a body of water gets shoved, it becomes a message. A tsunami is just water delivering news at high speed. You remember the old accounts because everyone here knows them. The 1883 eruption did not just blow ash into the sky. It tore the volcano apart. It made sound waves that traveled around the planet. It made darkness at noon and pumice rafts the size of cities. And it made waves that reached coasts before anyone understood they were in danger. The lead does not dramatize it. They say it like a tired professor. Caldera collapse, pyroclastic flows, shock waves. Then they look at you and their eyes narrow slightly. The part people forget, they say, is geometry. This strait is a funnel. The coasts are close. The water is shallow enough to stack and narrow enough to focus. A wave here has nowhere to dissipate. It has to run. You look across at Java's coastline again. It looks peaceful, which is how coastlines always look from a distance. You can almost see the beaches where people will stand later, staring at weird water, filming with phones. You imagine the delay. The wave is born here, but the consequences arrive over there. Humans are always reacting to yesterday. The team decides to take advantage of the pause while the boat holds offshore. Quick drone pass, the lead says. Shoreline transects. Photos for comparison. You hear the logic immediately. If the flank is changing, you want proof. If it fails, you want a before image. You unzip a case and the drone comes out like a nervous insect. Gray plastic, folding arms, blinking lights. It looks laughably small against a volcano. But it is not competing with the volcano. It is collecting receipts. You launch it from the berm. The rotors whine, and the little machine lifts into air that smells like sulfur and salt. It climbs, steadier than you feel. On the controller screen, the island becomes a textured surface. Crater at the top, ash fields below, gullies like veins. You guide it toward the southwest flank, where the crack line arcs. The camera shows the slope in unforgiving detail, loose layers, fresh slumps, and then the reveal you were dreading. A crescent-shaped scarp, a subtle bite, newly carved into the flank. It is not huge. It is not the kind of thing a tourist would notice. But you do not need huge. You need new. The edge is sharp, and the ash beneath it is darker, fresher, exposed. It looks like something has already started to detach. The lead leans in, and you watch their jaw tighten. They do not say collapse. They say slump, small sector instability, but you can hear the unspoken words behind it. Slumps are rehearsals. Slumps teach the slope how to fail. The thermal camera operator points at the screen. Heat signature. The warm band seems to line up with the crescent. Gas and heat are choosing that sector. They are weakening it. They are pushing. You bring the drone back because you do not need to test battery life today. It lands, and you fold it away like a secret. The lead begins taking shoreline photos, walking a careful line above the tide. You follow, holding a measuring tape, marking reference points. You take photos of boulders, drift lines, the angle of the beach. It feels absurd, cataloging sand while the island, but you know why it matters. Because when the shoreline shifts, it is not just a pretty change. It is evidence of deposition, erosion, and instability. New black sand can mean fresh ash. Fresh ash can mean more weight on a slope. More weight can mean failure comes sooner. You finish the transect and you return to the berm. The boat is still offshore, a small shape on restless water. The captain keeps the bow pointed into the swell. The engine noise carries faintly, a low mechanical growl that feels comforting. Human sound, human effort, a reminder that something here is trying to control outcomes. The lead radios in your findings. Fresh crescent scarp on southwest flank. Warm band. Increased tremor. Wind calm. Sea state building. They give timestamps. They give coordinates. They speak like the world is listening. But you do not know who is actually hearing. The radio clicks back, a coastal contact acknowledging. The words are brief. Received. Monitoring. That is not a plan. That is a posture. Monitoring is what you do when you cannot move a coastline out of the way. You sit for a moment on the berm because your legs need it. The ash on your clothes has turned your sweat into paste. Your mouth tastes like metal and your throat feels sanded. You take a sip from your water bottle and the water tastes faintly like plastic and fear. The volcano is quieter now, not calm, just quiet. The detonations are spaced farther apart. The plume thins. The sea continues to hiss below. Your brain tries to interpret the quiet as relief, but you remember the rule you learned the hard way in other places. Silence is sometimes just a system changing modes. The lead checks the weather again. Clouds are thickening to the west, but they have not arrived yet. The squall line is still a distant bruise. You might have another hour before rain complicates everything. The decision is made without drama. You will attempt pickup from the berm, not the beach. The boat will come as close as it can, and you will wade if you must. It is not ideal, but nothing here is ideal. You shoulder the gear again. Data cards, sample bags, thermal camera, radio. The weight feels heavier now, not because it changed, but because the island has changed the meaning of time. You move down toward the waterline in a tight group. You keep eyes on the slope above, because rockfall is a casual hobby here. You step onto wet sand, and it gives beneath you like a living thing. The water is cooler than you expect. A quick shock against your boots. The first wave slaps your shins, then pulls back hard. It tries to take your footing. You plant wide, and you curse quietly. The boat edges closer. Careful, engines adjusting. A crew member throws a line. It lands short, dragged by current. They throw again. This one reaches. You grab it, and the rope is wet and gritty, already coated with volcanic sand. You pull, and the boat inches in. The sea rises in a set, and the hull lifts. Then it drops, and the prop churns foam. The captain is dancing with the swell, trying not to let the boat get turned sideways. You time your movement between waves, stepping forward when the water rises, stepping back when it pulls. It is like negotiating with an animal that does not recognize you. One by one, you hand gear to the crew. The lead goes first, because the radio must stay dry and functional. Then the thermal operator. Then you. You wade deeper, water to your thighs, and a wave hits harder than the last. It pushes into your chest, and for a half second, you are weightless, feet sliding. You lunge, grab the gunwale, and haul yourself up as the boat lifts again. Your body lands awkwardly on wet fiberglass. You lie there for a breath, feeling the boat's vibration through your ribs. Then you crawl to the side and look back at the island. From the water, Anak Krakatau looks almost delicate, a cone of gray and black, steaming quietly. But you have been on it. You know it is not delicate. It is unfinished. The captain pulls away quickly because staying near shore is how you die for no reason. The boat climbs over the chop and the island recedes. You feel your muscles finally unclench. You have left the slope, you have left the crack, you have left the warm ash, but you have not left the process, because the process includes the sea, and you are still on the sea. The Strait carries you, and it carries everything else. The lead opens the notebook again, reviewing the drone footage on a tablet. They zoom in on the crescent scarp, tracing its edge with a finger. They do not look satisfied. They look focused. The kind of focus that comes when you see a small failure that could become a large one. The boat rocks and the horizon tilts. You watch current lines slide past, and you imagine them as conveyor belts. If the flank fails, those currents will carry debris and energy. They will carry the consequences to coasts that feel far, but are not. The lead speaks not into the radio this time, but to the group. They remind you of the principle you wrote down earlier, but now it lands heavier. Coastal volcano, water plus magma, explosions without warning. And if part of the island collapses, the sea becomes the amplifier. You nod, staring at the island's southwest flank. It looks the same from here. You can barely see the crack. You cannot see the crescent scarp. Distance is a liar. The boat drifts a little farther out to deeper water where the swell rounds out. The captain points the bow toward a safer holding pattern. They want to wait, not out of curiosity, out of caution. If something happens, you do not want to be too close. And if nothing happens, you do not want to waste the day. You sit on a storage box, wet clothes cooling in the breeze. The wind returns in faint, inconsistent breaths. It carries the smell of ash, then loses it. It carries the smell of the open sea, then loses that too. The sky to the west is thickening, the squall line slowly building definition. Your eyes keep returning to the crater. The plume is still present, but it is no longer thin and polite. It pulses slightly, as if the volcano is breathing deeper. You watch, and you realize the breathing is not random. Tiny puffs, then a pause. Tiny puffs, then a longer pause. It is as if the system is testing valves. You listen to the sound over the water, a distant low rumble, muffled by distance. Then another. Then a brief quiet. Your body tries to relax anyway because it is human and it wants to survive by pretending. You do not let it. You keep your attention on the island because you have seen enough places to know the pattern. Small signs, soft warnings, the slow tightening of a story. You check your watch. Midday is slipping toward afternoon. The heat builds and the air feels heavier, like the weather is leaning in. The lead calls a coastal monitoring station again, giving an update. Unrest steady. Slope instability observed. No collapse yet. Sea state moderate. They ask if any unusual tide behavior has been reported. The reply is boring. No anomalies. Normal fishing activity. That should comfort you. Instead, it makes you uneasy. Normal life next to abnormal geology is the setup for tragedy. You lean forward, elbows on knees, and you stare at the line where the island meets the sea. That boundary is the whole danger. Not the crater itself, not the ash, not the heat. The seam where a moving slope can meet a dense fluid. Rock falling into water. A shove. A displacement, a wave. Your mind drifts back to the bathymetry chart, the drowned caldera, steep steps, a bowl. If part of Anak Krakatau slides, it does not just slide into a flat seabed, it slides into a shaped void. That geometry can focus energy. A landslide does not need to be huge to be efficient. It just needs to be fast and directed. The southwest flank is pointed toward the most populated shores. That detail is not poetic. It is logistical. The captain adjusts course slightly, keeping you aligned with the island but farther out. You watch the sunlight glitter on the chop. The sea looks cheerful. The sea is always cheerful right before it kills people. The lead asks you to help prepare a rapid report template. If a collapse happens, you will need to send timing and estimated wave height cues. You open a waterproof notebook and you write headings: time of failure, direction, approximate volume, if visible, wave behavior near source, estimated arrival times based on distance and typical tsunami speed in shallow water. You write it down like homework because that is what disaster preparation feels like. Homework that might save strangers. The volcano gives another low detonation. The plume thickens again. The thicker plume does not rise like smoke from a campfire. It rises like something pressurized, finding a seam, then pretending it is normal. You watch it pulse, and you realize the island is not quieting down. It is gathering itself. The lead volcanologist lifts binoculars, and you follow their gaze to the southwest flank. The slope still looks smooth from here, like a simple cone of ashen rock. But you have walked that surface. You know it is a skin stretched over loose sliding layers. The radio on the bench beside you spits out a burst of static. Then a voice. A coastal station asks for confirmation because their instruments just caught a change. Not an earthquake, not a big one. A low-frequency wiggle. Long-period energy. The kind that makes you sit up. Your lead answers with numbers, not adjectives. Tremor amplitude trending up. Plume output increasing. Visual on a fresh scarp on the southwest sector. The coastal voice goes quiet for a beat, then says they are alerting. Local disaster management. Alerting is not evacuating. It is the bureaucratic version of clearing your throat. The captain keeps the boat in deeper water, but the hull still rocks, as if the Strait cannot sit still. You feel it in your stomach, a slow lift and drop, like being carried in the palm of a bored giant. The swells are not huge, but they are confused. They come from different directions, intersecting, canceling, then spiking. That is what happens in a narrow corridor between big islands. Java and Sumatra do not just hold the water in, they make it ricochet. You taste ash again, faint in the wind, and you did not see anything fall. It means the plume is shedding fine grit, the kind that travels without asking. The lead asks for another look at the drone footage, and you slide the tablet closer. You pinch and zoom on the crescent scarp. The fresh bite in the flank. The edge is sharper than your brain wants it to be. Loose material has already slumped, and it left a clean lip like torn paper. Your lead traces a line with their finger from the scarp down to the shoreline. It lines up with the Lahar channel you followed earlier, a ready-made chute, a pathway for debris if the slope decides to fail. Congratulations, you are staring at a conveyor belt pointed at the sea. The captain calls out from the helm, pointing toward the island. A small rockfall, visible as a gray trickle on the flank, sliding like spilled sugar. It does not reach the water, not yet, but it moves in the exact sector you do not want to see moving. The lead does not raise their voice. They just says, log it. You write the time, and you write what you saw, and you hate how ordinary it feels. Because this is how a big event begins, in small events that look dismissible. The sky to the west thickens, and the squall line finally starts to look like weather, not a rumor. The air cools a fraction, and you feel the pressure change in your ears. That matters, because pressure changes can also bother volcanic systems. Not because the volcano is fragile, but because it is already loaded. Small nudges count when the system is balanced at its edge. The lead asks the captain to keep the bow pointed into the swell and to be ready to move fast. Move where is the unspoken part. You cannot outrun a local wave in a small boat, not if you are too close. Your only option is to not be in the wrong place when it happens. So you drift, you watch, and you wait, like everyone always does, around dangerous geography. The plume thickens again, then thins, like the volcano is breathing through congestion. You hear another detonation, deeper, and it seems to come from inside the water itself. That is the sound traveling through the caldera, through the drowned cavity below. Water carries low-frequency sound better than air, and the Strait is full of it. The captain mutters something about the sea feeling wrong. Not the swell, not the wind, just the texture. You look down at the surface and you see slick patches, darker streaks, places where the water looks oiled. That can be ash, fine particles settling, changing how light reflects. It can also be gas bubbling up in invisible sheets. The lead leans over the side, squinting, then says quietly, "There is degassing offshore." Not a dramatic boil, just subtle agitation. It is the kind of detail that makes you think about vents, fissures, and the fact that the volcano does not stop at the shoreline. The mountain continues under the water, and the water hides the parts you should fear most. You watch the island's southwest flank again. You tell yourself to memorize it the way you memorize a face in a crowd, because if it changes quickly, you need to know what changed. A faint line, the crack you saw on land, becomes barely visible even from the boat. It is not a canyon, not a trench, just a suggestion of separation. And then, without drama, it lengthens, not like a zipper ripping open, but like a hairline fracture creeping forward. You only notice because you are staring hard enough to hallucinate. But you are not hallucinating. The lead sees it too, and their hand tightens around the binoculars. They key the radio and speak to the coastal station again. They give an update. Possible crack propagation, southwest sector. They ask them to push warnings now, not later. There is a pause. Then the coastal station says, "They are trying." Trying is what people say when the machinery of response is bigger than urgency. The boat drifts. Then the captain corrects, keeping distance. You realize how close you still are, even out here. The island looks like it is a short swim away, which is a cruel optical trick. Distance on water is hard to judge, and that is how people end up surprised. A gust returns, sudden, and it carries the sulfur smell directly at you. It is stronger now, sharper, like struck matches and rust. You blink, and your eyes sting. The lead's gas monitor chirps softly, a warning tone like a polite cough. Sulfur dioxide, up. Not catastrophic, just trending. Trending is the word that makes you tired, because it means the story is still building. The squall line arrives as a dark smear, and the light flattens. The sea shifts color from glittering blue to bruised gray. Rain starts in thin needles, then thickens. It hits ash on the boat's deck and turns it into paste, slick underfoot. The captain curses under their breath and wipes the windshield. Visibility drops, and the island softens around the edges. You can still see the plume, though. It is darker than the cloud behind it, a vertical stain. The lead says something you have been thinking but did not want to say out loud. Rain on fresh ash makes everything heavier. It adds weight to the slope, and it lubricates weak layers. It turns powder into slurry, and slurry moves easier than sand. So, if that flank is already cracked and warm, rain is not a minor inconvenience. It is a shove. You watch the southwest sector, and the rain makes small streaks appear, tiny rivulets carving down. At first, they are just lines. Then they darken, Then they connect. The island is drawing new drainage in real time. The lead tells the captain to pull farther out, and the captain does it without argument. The engine tone rises, the boat lifts and slams gently, then settles into a faster rhythm. You move to hold onto a rail because the deck is slick now. Your notebook gets speckled with rain, but it is waterproof, and so is your fear. The island fades behind rain curtains, then reappears. It has the annoying habit of making you think you have a moment, then taking it away. A deeper rumble rolls across the water, longer than the earlier detonations. It is not a bang, it is a continuous growl. The lead looks at the seismometer feed again, and the line is thick, noisy, energetic. The kind of tremor that suggests fluid movement, magma and gas shifting underground, plumbing reorganizing, just like they said. The boat's radio crackles again, and this time it is not the coastal station. It is another vessel, a fishing boat closer to the island, asking what is happening. Their voice is casual, curious, human. They have no reason to expect the sea to change its mind. The lead answers, telling them to clear the area, to move east, to give the island space. There is a pause, then the fisher replies with uncertainty. They say they will finish a set first. You look toward where the fishing lights were earlier, but the rain hides them. This is how it goes. People bargain with danger because danger rarely charges interest immediately. The rain eases for a moment, and the island sharpens again in your view. That is when you see it, the movement that makes your skin go cold. The southwest flank is sagging, not sliding fast, not collapsing, just settling in a way that is wrong, like a shelf bowing under weight. You can see a subtle change in the angle of a band of ash, a slight bulge near the scarp. It is small, but it is coordinated. A piece of the island is deciding it is no longer attached in spirit. The lead raises their hand, as if holding the slope in place by gesture. They tell everyone to watch and to stop moving, and to listen. You listen, and you realize you can hear it even from here. A faint cracking, like distant branches, snapping, layered under the rumble. The sound travels over water in a way that feels intimate. The captain turns the boat slightly to keep a clear view and a clear escape route. You are no longer waiting out of caution. You are waiting because leaving would not outrun what is coming. And then the flank makes its choice. It does not explode. It does not throw fire. It simply lets go. A whole sector of the southwest slope begins to move as one ugly mass sliding downward with a slow start that becomes faster. The surface fractures into blocks and ash, and the blocks ride the ash like furniture in a landslide. The sound becomes a continuous roar, not loud in the air, but deep in your bones. You can see dust, gray and brown, rising from the moving slope like breath. The lead says one word: calm and terrible. Collapse. You grip the rail and you watch the mass accelerate toward the shoreline. It hits the water with an impact that looks muted, because water swallows violence, but the effect is immediate. A surge rises, not a tall wall, but a steep heaving mound of water pushed outward. The sea bulges, then runs. The first thing you notice is not the wave coming out. It is the water pulling back near the island. The shoreline exposes itself in a sudden retreat, wet black sand appearing like a secret. Debris that was floating is left stranded for a moment, twitching in the draining flow. The captain swears and pushes the throttle to keep you in deeper water. The lead is already on the radio, voice suddenly sharper. Sector collapse observed, southwest flank, timestamp given. They transmit coordinates and repeat them because repetition is all you have against confusion. You watch the initial surge run outward through the strait, and you realize why local tsunamis kill. There is no waiting for a distant warning. The wave is born already close. It is a fast-moving shove racing along the corridor between Java and Sumatra. The lead calls out what they see, because narration becomes data when you are disciplined. Wave train forming, multiple crests, first crest moving east and southeast, possible reflections expected. The captain angles the boat to meet the swell head-on because you do not want to be sideways to what comes next. Your stomach drops as the water under you changes shape, steepening. The boat rises hard, then slides down, slapping into trough. It is not one wave. It is messy, a set of pulses. Because the collapse was messy, the flank did not fall as a clean slab. It broke and poured, and the water responded in kind. You look back at the island and ash is rising from the collapse scar, thicker now. The volcano is reacting to decompression like a shaken bottle finally opened. The plume darkens and it starts to pulse faster. Small bursts, closer together, ash lofting, then falling back. Visibility drops again, but the sea stays bright where it crests, white foam against gray water. The contrast is obscene. Beautiful physics, lethal timing. The lead calls the coastal station again, and this time there is no polite preamble. Tsunami generated, local, immediate. They give estimated arrival windows. Crude but urgent. Minutes, not hours. They say the names of coastal areas, and you hear your own throat tighten, because names mean people. A voice comes back, strained, now saying they are activating sirens. Activating sirens is not the same as moving bodies. The boat rides another steep pulse, and you feel the hull shudder. Loose gear slides, and someone catches a case before it tumbles. You hold on, and you watch the wave energy run past, spreading but still confined by the geography. This is the strait as a delivery system, a corridor that keeps energy from dispersing into open ocean. Java and Sumatra act like walls, and the wave bounces between them, folding back. You see it start to happen, reflected surges returning from the directions of the coasts. Not yet breaking, not yet obvious, but the surface becomes cross-hatched with interference patterns. The lead points, calling out the physics in plain language, reflections stacking, wave periods interacting, unpredictable peaks possible near shore, meaning someone might see the first surge and think it is over. Then the second arrives, bigger. Congratulations, you live on a coastline that teaches lessons in sequels. The captain keeps distance, but you cannot keep distance from the view. Your eyes follow the outgoing wave toward Java, and you try to imagine what it looks like at the beach. Not a Hollywood wall, more like a sudden, fast rise, a surge that runs up farther than it should, dragging boats, ripping moorings, flooding low ground. And then the retreat, pulling people off their feet if they stand too close. People always stand too close. The rain returns in heavier sheets and the island becomes a silhouette again. Lightning flickers inside the ash plume, faint at first, then clearer. Volcanic lightning, charge building in ash clouds. Like static taken seriously, it makes the plume look alive. A nervous system firing in the sky. You do not need more proof that this is all connected. Rock, water, air, electricity, all of it in one angry feedback loop. The lead keeps talking into the radio, updating as best they can. They describe the collapse scar, a missing wedge, and ongoing slumping at the margins. Secondary failures possible, they say. Wave train continuing. They ask for confirmation of coastal observations. The reply comes with delays and distortion, but it comes. Unusual water movement reported at a nearby shore. First inundation minor but fast. People running, sirens late. You close your eyes for a moment, not for calm, but because the image is too easy to build. Fishing boats in shallow water, children on beaches, motorbikes on coastal roads, people filming because filming feels like control. Then the water arriving like a correction. When you open your eyes again, the boat is riding a smaller pulse. The worst near you seems to have passed, but the Strait still churns. The captain does not relax. They know the reflections can come back and surprise you. The lead checks the seismometer feed again, and the tremor has changed character. More chaotic now, more bursts, less steady hum. The volcano is responding to the collapse like an animal startled mid-sleep. Not because it has emotions, because pressure pathways just opened and fluids are moving fast. The plume pulses darker and you can see incandescent glow at the vent through breaks in the rain. A faint orange, like a stove burner seen through smoke. The lead says it quietly, almost to themselves. Magma is close to the surface. And now the flank is weakened. The captain asks if you should leave entirely, head for a harbor. The lead hesitates, then says you stay offshore but farther east, away from the island and away from direct reflection zones. You want to keep observing because data matters, but you do not want to be inside the machine. So the boat moves, engines steady, cutting through confused water. As you gain distance, the island shrinks, but it does not look less dangerous. It looks more deceptive, like a small thing capable of large consequences. The wave energy continues to play out across the strait, and you can see it in the way the surface never settles. Even when the crests are smaller, the patterns remain wrong. The lead receives another radio message, this time from a contact on Sumatra's side. Reports of flooding in low coastal areas, boats thrown inland, people injured. The voice is clipped, trying to stay professional, but the emotion leaks through the pauses. You feel a helpless anger, which is useless and therefore common, because you did not cause the wave, but you watched it be born, and watching does not feel like enough. The lead asks for casualty counts, then stops themselves. It is too early. In local events, information arrives in fragments, like driftwood after a storm. First there is noise, then numbers, then names. The volcano throws another burst, and the plume climbs higher, darker against the rain. Ash begins to fall on the boat again, fine as flour. It sticks to wet surfaces, forming gray paste on rails, on your hands, on your notebook. Your skin itches where ash mixes with sweat and rain. The lead tells everyone to cover equipment, to protect the radios and sensors. Not because gear matters more than people, because gear is how people in offices will understand what happened here. And understanding is the only tool that sometimes changes response. You look back at the island, and the collapse scar is now visible even at distance. A raw missing wedge on the southwest flank, darker inside, steaming. It looks like exposed muscle. The edges continue to crumble, small secondary slumps falling into the water in trickles. The sea around the island starts doing that thing it does when it is processing a sudden injury. It does not settle. It rearranges itself in confused bands, like it cannot remember which direction is normal. You watch a smaller surge roll back toward the island, then split around it. It meets another reflection from the Java side, and the crests stack briefly. The water lifts into a sharper ridge than either wave had alone. Then it collapses into foam, and the foam races outward like gossip. This is the part people on shore never see. They get one dramatic arrival, then a pause, then another. Out here, you see the whole messy argument. Every coastline is a hard surface for energy to bounce off. Java and Sumatra are not scenery. They are the corridor walls. Your captain keeps the bow angled into the steepest pulses, making constant tiny corrections. A small boat cannot win against a wave. It can only avoid being turned sideways. The engine tone rises and falls like a nervous animal trying to keep its footing. Your lead volcanologist keeps one hand on the radio and one on the tablet. They are watching two disasters at once. The sea is moving fast, and the volcano is adjusting its breathing. You can see the plume thicken again, and the lightning inside it flickers more often. Not because the volcano is angry, because ash particles collide, build charge, and discharge. A storm made out of rock dust. The collapsed scar continues to steam. The missing wedge looks darker, like the island has been peeled open. Fresh material pours in small trickles from the edges, trying to refill the gap. It is not healing. It is unloading. Gravity is taking advantage of the weakness, one small slough at a time. Each slough hits the water with a soft splash you can barely hear. Each splash makes a tiny local surge, a small ripple under the bigger wave train. You realize how many ways the sea can be shoved in one afternoon. The radio crackles again, and you catch fragments from the coastal station. They are trying to describe what the shore is doing. The first water rise looked like a fast tide. Then it pulled back hard, exposing rocks that are never exposed. People ran, then stopped, then ran again, because the second surge arrived while they were trying to understand the first. Your lead asks for specifics, and it sounds cold. How far inland? How long between crests? Any reports of boats missing? They need numbers, because numbers travel farther than emotion. A different voice comes on the channel, clipped and strained. Local disaster management is asking for confirmation that this is not a distant earthquake tsunami. Your lead answers, and you can hear the fatigue underneath the precision. Local source: sector collapse at Anak Krakatau. Wave train ongoing. Expect multiple arrivals and strong currents for hours. Hours is the word that makes everything worse. Because people can survive one surprise wave, they do not survive the decision to go back too soon. The captain glances at you, then at the horizon, then back at the island. They are measuring risk in gut feelings. and fuel levels. They ask if there is any chance of a bigger collapse following the first. Your lead does not offer comfort. They say yes, possible. Secondary slumps, further destabilization, especially with rain loading the ash, and decompression may increase eruptive bursts. In human language, the island could keep falling apart, and it might start throwing more material too. The captain nods once and pushes farther east, not fleeing, just relocating to a safer angle. You do not want to be directly in line with the most energetic reflections. The strait is shallow enough in places that the wave speed is cruel. It is not the deep ocean, where energy spreads out and hides. Here, it stays packed together, and it runs like a rumor through a small town. As you move, the water beneath you changes character. The steep pulses soften into longer rolling heaves, still abnormal, but less eager to flip you. You can breathe again, but you do not relax, because the shore reports keep coming, and they get worse by degrees. Not cinematic devastation, just the kind of damage that ruins lives quietly. Fishing boats lifted onto roads, wooden docks snapped, a concrete seawall undercut then cracked, shops along the beach flooded to knee height, then waist height, and the current after the crest was stronger than the crest itself. That last detail matters more than people think. Water moving sideways can kill faster than water moving up. A tsunami is not only a wave, it is a sustained, chaotic rearrangement of the sea level. And the sea does not do gentle rearrangements. You look back at Anak Krakatau again, and the island is still there. Smaller, jagged on one side, but standing. That is the most dangerous kind of outcome. A disaster that does not end the system, it only resets it. The lead pulls up older imagery comparing before and after on the tablet. The cone used to look symmetrical from this angle. Now it looks lopsided, as if someone took a spoon to one side. The missing sector points toward the open water, and that direction is not random. Volcanoes build unstable slopes fast, and water undermines them faster. That is the simplest cause and effect here. You pile loose ash and blocks into a cone. Rain turns ash into paste. Waves eat the base. Magma adds heat and gas and cracks the whole thing like a stressed foundation. Then gravity does the only job it ever has. Congratulations, you have built an island that wants to become the seabed again. The lead asks you to note the time of the largest local pulse you felt on the boat. You flip to a clean page, even though there is no clean page anymore. Everything has ash on it. You write the time, and you write a description of the boat motion, the steepness, the direction. You include the rain intensity, because rain changes the story on land. This is the part that feels like an expedition journal, and also like evidence collection at a crime scene. The suspect is gravity, and it never confesses. The ashfall thickens again, and your eyes sting. Fine particles stick to wet skin, and the salt from sea spray makes it worse. You pull your collar up, and you taste grit with every breath. The captain offers goggles from a storage bin, scratched and ugly. You put them on anyway, and the world becomes slightly less painful. Even through the rain, you can see a faint orange flicker at the vent. Not a fountain, not a lava river, just the steady glow of magma close enough to light the smoke. The lead watches it and says something that lands heavy in your chest. The collapse removed pressure. Removing pressure can let gas expand. Expanding gas can drive more explosive bursts, so the failure of the slope can make the eruption behavior change. The island does not separate its hazards for your convenience. It stacks them. A fresh burst sends a darker puff into the cloud, and the lightning snaps again. Your captain flinches because humans still react to lightning like it is personal. The sound arrives late, muffled by rain and distance. It is not thunder from weather. It is the crackle of charged ash, discharging like a static shock scaled up to the sky. The radio catches another message, and this one is from a port authority farther along the coast. They are asking if they should stop ferry traffic. Your lead says yes, immediately. Strong currents can grab boats in harbors, slam them into piers, and make rescues impossible. Harbors are supposed to be safe. A tsunami makes them into washing machines. You can hear people talking in the background on that channel, overlapping voices. The machinery of human response is waking up late. It is loud, and it is complicated, and it is still slower than water. You feel the boat roll through another set of pulses. Smaller now, the captain points at the sea surface, and you see whirl patterns, circular slicks, eddies forming where wave energy and strong tide meet. The strait already has ripping currents on a normal day. Now the normal day is gone, and the current is improvising. A floating log spins past, then a clump of vegetation, then something that looks like a piece of roof panel. Debris is arriving from shore, which means the shore has been busy breaking. You think of the fishing boat that asked what was happening. The one that wanted to finish a set first. You wonder if they did. You do not ask out loud because you do not want the answer on the radio. The lead has you help estimate wave travel times to specific coastal points. You do it the simple way because there is no time for elegance. Distance divided by approximate speed in shallow water. Then you add uncertainty, because uncertainty is honest. Local bathymetry can focus or slow. Inlets can amplify. Reefs can break a surge into a faster current. You hand the estimates back, and your lead transmits them with careful phrasing. Likely arrival window, not guaranteed. Multiple surges likely. Do not return to shore after first wave. That last line gets repeated again and again because it is the lesson people refuse to learn. The sea is not a single action. It is a process. And processes do not care about your attention span. The rain starts to weaken, and the light changes. Late afternoon slips toward evening, and the cloud deck thins enough to let a dull glow through. The island is clearer now, and the collapsed scar is brutal in the softer light. Steam rises from it in pale sheets. Fresh material continues to dribble down, forming little fans at the waterline. Those fans hit the sea, and the sea immediately starts reshaping them. Wave action pulls the finest ash away, leaving heavier fragments behind. The shoreline is being sorted like laundry. Light stuff carried off, heavy stuff left to bruise ankles later. The captain keeps you at a distance that feels both safe and too close. Safe because the immediate wave energy is easing. Too close because you are still watching an unstable slope in rain-softened ash. Your lead is thinking the same thing. They ask the captain if you can maintain this position until dusk. The captain hesitates, then agrees, but only if the sea state continues to calm. They do not want to be in the strait at night if currents stay chaotic. Night hides wave texture. Night turns a hazard into a surprise. You log another set of observations because your job is to be tedious when nature is dramatic. Plume height, moderate but persistent. Ash fall, light, lightning intermittent. Sea surface, still confused but trending toward longer period motion. And then, the detail that makes your lead go quiet for a moment. A faint, steady glow lower on the cone, near the collapse scar. Not at the main vent, on the fresh exposed face. It looks like heat radiating through thin ash layers, or maybe a small secondary vent opening. Your lead raises binoculars, and their posture tightens again. They say it softly, as if the island might hear. New fumarolic activity on the scarp. In human terms, the fresh wound is steaming harder and possibly venting gas directly. That matters because gas pathways can lubricate failure planes. Hot fluids moving through loose debris can turn it into something that slides easier. The island is not just missing a piece now, it is actively changing the chemistry and temperature of the missing edge. You look at the scar and you imagine it underwater too. A slope continuing beneath the surface, coated in fresh debris. Fresh debris is unstable on land. Underwater, it can be worse because you cannot see it creep. Submarine landslides do not announce themselves with cracking sounds you can hear. They just go, and the first thing you know is water rising where it should not. The lead asks for one more radio check with the coastal stations. You listen to the replies, and they are a chorus of partial information. Some places report only strong currents and minor flooding. Some report boats destroyed, injuries, and people missing. One station mentions a beach resort area where tourists were filming. They stop talking for a second, then say the cameras were found later, not the people. Your stomach tightens and you swallow ash and say nothing. Because there is nothing clever to say about a coastline that eats witnesses. As the sun drops lower, the air cools. The sea becomes a darker metal color. The island's plume becomes more visible against the dim sky, like a column of bruised breath. And then, almost insultingly, the volcano does what volcanoes do after they have hurt people. It starts building again. You notice it first as a change in sound, a deeper, more continuous exhalation, like a furnace door left slightly open. Then you see it, a small, bright pulse at the vent, and a spray of incandescent fragments. Not a towering fountain, but a steady spatter. Glowing rock arcing up, then landing on the upper slope, then dimming to red, then black. The cone is being repainted in real time. Fresh material, still hot, settling onto loose ash. Each fragment adds weight and heat and instability. Your lead watches and gives you the explanation like a bedtime story for people who cannot sleep. After a collapse, the magma column can rise because pressure dropped. When magma rises, gas comes out of solution. Gas makes things frothy, and frothy magma explodes more easily. So you can get a phase of intensified strombolian activity, the spattering bursts. Strombolian is the word. Human translation: a volcano throwing glowing rocks like a campfire that hates you. The spatter starts to accumulate near the rim, and small glowing rivulets appear. Not a lava flow you can ride in a movie. More like thick, slow, sticky molten rock creeping a few body lengths down slope, then stopping as it cools, like it lost motivation. But even that matters. Because lava can weld loose ash into harder crust, creating slabs that later detach as larger chunks. A volcano builds traps out of its own attempts at stability. You watch the upper slope glow in pulses, and you realize the island is patching its wound, not with care, but with volume. It is filling the missing wedge with new ejecta, the way a printer spits paper into an overflowing tray. Your lead says it like a grim joke. The island is reloading. You think of the coastline damage reports, and you feel a bitter irony. The people are counting losses. The island is manufacturing the next failure plane. The captain shifts the boat slightly, keeping you downwind of the thickest ash. But the wind is indecisive. Again, it swings the plume, and the smell of sulfur rolls over you in a wave. Your eyes sting behind the goggles, and your throat aches. You take a sip of water, and it tastes like wet plastic and volcanic dust. Your lead begins talking about the drowned caldera again, because it is impossible not to. This whole system sits on the rim of an older catastrophe. The 1983 eruption was not the first lesson here. The 1883 eruption made the template. A volcano collapses. The sea gets shoved. The strait carries the shove to busy coasts. Then, the volcano grows back. Anak Krakatau literally means child of Krakatau. And like many children, it repeats the family habits. You can see the cycle in the island's shape. New cone, built since the 1920s. Decades of growth, then collapses, then growth again. The sea erodes the base, waves undercutting loose deposits. Rain loads and lubricates ash. Magma intrudes, heating and fracturing. Then gravity pulls a sector away. If you wanted to engineer a tsunami generator, you would pick this exact geometry. A steep cone next to shallow water, sitting on the rim of a deep bowl, in a narrow corridor between populated shores. Congratulations, Earth did the engineering for you. The lead asks you to help with one more task, and it feels almost absurd now. They want to mark in the log which instruments were left on the island and which were retrieved, because if the island continues to change, those stations might be gone. And if they are gone, you need to know what data you lost and when. You list them. Seismometer station on the ridge, active. GPS marker? Checked. Active. Thermal transect completed? Drone imagery captured and backed up? You feel relief that at least something was recorded cleanly. Data is the only thing that does not drown. The radio continues to carry shore voices, now mixed with after-action confusion. Some sirens worked, some did not. Some people evacuated uphill. Some stayed to watch. Some returned too soon to retrieve belongings, and the later surges caught them. That is the other cruel truth. The first wave is often survivable. The second and third are the ones that punish curiosity and denial. The sea loves a repeat visitor. As the light fades further, you notice a new change in the sea surface. The chaotic cross-hatching slowly smooths into longer, more regular swell. Not normal, but less angry. The captain exhales, and you realize they were holding their breath in small pieces. They say if conditions keep improving, you will head for harbor before full dark. Not because the volcano is done, because your human capacity to navigate debris and currents is limited. You are not the ocean. You do not get to operate all night. The lead agrees, but asks to remain in visual range a bit longer. They want to watch the rebuilding phase, because rebuilding is part of the hazard story. A collapsed volcano is not safer. It is often worse because the structure is weakened and the system is open. The spattering at the vent continues, and the glow intensifies intermittently. Then, for a brief stretch, it calms. And in that calmer interval, you see the island's new silhouette. The missing wedge makes the cone asymmetrical. The summit rim looks jagged. The slope down the scar is steeper and fresher. A clean face of loose debris. That face is now the most important surface in the Sunda Strait, because it is where the next collapse will likely start. Fresh deposits do not lock in quickly. They sit loosely, waiting for rain, wave undercutting, or another intrusion of magma. The lead points to the lower part of the scar, where the sea is washing in and out. They explain the undercutting in plain terms. Every wave removes a bit of support at the toe of the slope. That toe is the only thing pretending the whole slope is a stable object. Every bite the surf takes is like pulling books from the bottom of a leaning shelf. Nothing falls at first. Then suddenly, the entire idea of balance gives up. You watch the water gnaw at the base, and you realize the sea is doing demolition in millimeters. Millimeters add up when the material above is loose, warm, and freshly rearranged. The lead keeps talking, and you keep listening, because listening is the only safe job left. They tell you waves do not need to be tall to be effective. They just need to be persistent and well-aimed. And this shoreline is a perfect aim point. The collapse scar creates a steep chute, and the sea is washing directly into it. That means every wave is not only eroding, it is also infiltrating. Water seeps into hot debris, flashes into steam, expands, and pries grains apart. It is like pouring water into a hot frying pan, except the frying pan is a mountain. You look at the scar again, and the steam rising from it seems thicker now, not from the vent, from the wound itself. That is the part that makes you tired. The volcano is not a single mouth at the top. It is a body full of pores, fractures, and bad ideas. The lead points at the lower scar and tells you to watch for something specific, not the big waves, the drawdown. Because when the sea pulls back, it does work too. It drags loose sand and ash seaward, thinning the toe even more. You start to notice the rhythm. The sea surges in, then retreats hard, as if it is still remembering the tsunami's instructions. Even as the bigger pulses fade, the currents remain stubborn. They keep sweeping along the island's flank, like hands searching for a grip. You feel the boat shift with a lateral tug, and the captain corrects without speaking. The strait is still moving like it has unfinished business, and you are still inside that corridor. The lead asks you to take a final set of photos through binoculars. They want the scar face in this light, while you still have it. You raise the camera, and your hands are less steady than you pretend. You frame the missing wedge. You capture the jagged rim. You capture the little fans of debris forming at the waterline. And while you are looking, you see another small slough. A thin sheet of ash slides down the scar, like someone pulling a blanket off a bed. It hits the water, and the water answers with a small outward ripple, not a tsunami. A reminder the island is still shedding and the sea is still translating. Your lead says to log it. You log it. Time, small secondary slough, lower scar, minor ripple observed. It feels ridiculous, writing notes about the world moving. But it is the only control you are allowed. You hear another sound, and for a second you think it is thunder. Then you remember the sky is not storming anymore. The sound is coming from the island, a low, sustained exhale, like a giant kettle just reached boil. The plume thickens, and a darker column rises above the crater. It is not tall enough to terrify you properly, which is its own kind of danger. Because moderate activity is easy to normalize. You can live next to moderate risk for years, and then, one day, the risk remembers its heritage. The captain glances at the light, and you can see the decision forming. Night is coming. Debris is floating. Currents are still confused. The lead asks for 15 more minutes, and the captain gives them 10. This is what compromise looks like between science and survival. You shift your weight on the wet deck, and the ash under your boots feels like clay. The boat smells like diesel, salt, and sulfur. A practical perfume, the kind that says your comfort was never part of the plan. The lead leans closer to you, speaking quieter now. They want you to understand the sequence, because sequence is the lesson. First, the cone grows fast, because eruption builds steep slopes quickly. Then, waves undercut the base, because the sea never stops chewing. Then, rain adds weight and lubrication, and the ash turns into something that can slide. Then, magma intrudes, heating and fracturing, pushing gas through weaknesses. Then, gravity does not negotiate. It takes what it is owed. You nod, because you have watched the sequence happen in a few hours. But the lead reminds you it also happens over decades. That is the part that makes Anak Krakatau so dangerous. It is not a one-time monster. It is a repeating machine. The child cone has been growing since the early 20th century. It builds itself higher, steeper, heavier, and then it fails. Then it grows again. Then, a cycle that looks like progress if you only visit once. You watch the glow near the vent fade, then return, like the island is blinking. Small bursts of incandescent fragments continue, painting the rim. Each fragment lands, cools, and becomes part of tomorrow's slope. Tomorrow's slope is tomorrow's problem. Except tomorrow's problem lives on populated shores across a narrow strait. The radio carries another update from the coast. Rescue efforts starting, but people are still being told to stay away from beaches. Some are listening, some are not. A voice mentions that the sea is still surging inside harbors, sloshing like a bathtub. That means the wave energy is still reflecting, still trapped, still rearranging water levels. Tsunamis do not end when the first crest ends. They decay slowly, like a bell that keeps ringing after you stop hitting it. And the Sunda Strait is a very good bell. The lead asks you to imagine what the wave did underwater too, not just on beaches, on reefs, on seagrass beds, on seabed slopes. Fast currents scour sediments, uproot organisms, and trigger submarine slides. Those submarine slides can generate their own small surges. A disaster can make aftershocks out of mud. You look at the island again, and you feel the scale shift in your mind. You are not watching a single event. You are watching a chain reaction playing out across land and sea. The captain calls out another piece of floating debris. A plank, then a plastic container, then something that could be a door. You track it as it drifts past, riding the residual current. It makes the damage feel closer, more tangible. This is not just a wave. It is homes being dismantled into parts. The lead tells the captain, "You should start moving now." The captain nods and turns the bow away from the island. The engine tone deepens, steady and determined. You feel the boat take on a new rhythm, cutting across longer swells. And still, you keep looking back, because you cannot leave a place like this cleanly. Part of you stays, staring at the scar, trying to predict the next failure. As the boat gains distance, the island becomes a darker silhouette. The plume is still visible, a vertical smear into the evening sky. Lightning flickers inside it again, brief and pale, like nerves misfiring. The lead says volcanic lightning often intensifies when ash output increases. More ash particles collide, more charge builds, more discharge follows. It is physics doing drama, without intention. You are far enough now that the spatter at the vent looks like a tiny spark, a small signal from a system that just moved a coastline. That contrast is what keeps you awake. The captain aims for a harbor that offers shelter, but not safety from ash. You can shelter from waves. You cannot shelter from fine grit that gets into everything, including lungs. As you approach the coast, you see the first signs of human response. A few vehicles near the waterfront, lights flashing, people gathered on higher ground, silhouettes watching their own sea. Some are filming. Of course they are filming. You want proof when the world behaves badly? Proof makes it feel less like the planet is personal. The harbor entrance is choppy. The captain threads through carefully, reading the water like a tired language. Inside, the water should be calmer. Instead, it surges against pilings. Boats strain at lines, yawing and snapping back. The lead mutters, resonance. Harbors amplify certain wave periods. The basin shape traps energy, making water slosh back and forth. A tsunami can turn a safe marina into a hammer. You dock anyway because you need a stable place to transmit data and debrief. The crew ties lines tighter than usual. Your hands move automatically, nodding, pulling, checking. You step onto the dock, and it feels strange to be on something that does not move. Then the dock rises slightly under you, and you remember it does move. The water level is still oscillating. The planet is still finishing the sentence. You follow the lead up toward a small operations building. Inside, the air is dry and it smells like old coffee and electronics. Someone hands you a towel and you wipe ash off your face. The ash smears. It always smears. It does not leave politely. The lead plugs in a laptop and starts uploading drone footage and log entries. They speak to officials on a crackling line, repeating the essential points. Sector collapse observed. Tsunami generated. Local. Multiple surges. Currents remain strong for hours. Do not return to shore. You stand nearby, listening, while your body tries to process adrenaline into fatigue. You are exhausted in a way that feels older than the day, because you just watched geology and oceanography cooperate. They do not cooperate often. When they do, people get hurt. Someone in the building asks the obvious question, The one humans always ask, will it happen again tonight? The lead answers honestly, it could. The slope is still unstable and the eruption is still active. Secondary collapses are possible, especially with ongoing wave undercutting and rain-soaked debris. The official nods, and you can see the weight settle into their posture. How do you warn a coastline for a maybe? How do you keep people away from the water when the water is also their work? The lead sends you back outside to check the sea level behavior. You stand on higher ground above the harbor, looking down at the dark water. It continues to pulse, rising and falling by a noticeable amount. Not dramatic, just enough to make lines go slack, then taut, like the harbor is breathing. Each pulse is a memory of the collapse, energy trapped in the corridor. Still reflecting, you listen to the sound of water against concrete. It is a restless slap, then a pause, then another. You think about the people who will go down to the docks later, when things seem calm. They will decide calm means done. It rarely does. The lead comes out beside you, holding a small handheld device, a portable spectrometer used to measure gas concentrations when the wind carries a plume. They hold it up and the numbers jump, then settle. Sulfur dioxide is still present. Even here, the plume is reaching the coast. That means the volcano's breath is spreading beyond the island, laying a thin chemical signature over people who did not ask for it. Your lead says Anak Krakatau is dangerous because it has multiple delivery systems. Ash in the air, waves in the sea, and the strait itself acting like a corridor for both. You look out into the darkness where the island sits. You cannot see it clearly now, but you can see the faint stain of its plume against the night sky, and occasionally a tiny orange flicker. The child is still awake. A message comes in from another coastal area. They report the sea withdrew again, even after the main surges. That suggests ongoing oscillation, possibly from harbor resonance or reflected waves. The lead tells them to keep people away for the rest of the night. They say it in the same calm tone, because calm is how you keep words from becoming noise. You realize the lead has been doing this for years, watching systems, collecting data, warning people who may or may not listen. It is a profession built on being right too late. You sit on a bench outside the building and you finally let your shoulders drop. Your clothes are damp, crusted with ash and salt. Your throat is raw. The night air is cooler and it makes you shiver. The squall line has moved on, leaving a cleaner sky, except for the plume. You hear distant sirens along the coast, intermittent now, not continuous panic, more like reminders, the kind that fade as people get tired. And tired people make risky choices. The lead sits beside you and speaks softly, almost like they are trying not to wake anyone. They tell you about the 2018 event, the real one, the one that hurt so many. A flank collapse at Anak Krakatau, generating a tsunami that struck without an earthquake warning. People did not run because their earthquake sense never activated. They thought the sea was just misbehaving. The lead says that is why this volcano is a trap. It can generate tsunamis without the usual trigger. No felt shaking, no long warning, no distant source, just an island quietly failing into the sea and water translating it into speed. You already knew that, in theory. But theory is different after you watch the water pull back from the island's shore. Theory is different after you hear the roar of a sector moving. You ask the lead what you could have done differently. They give you the only honest answer: nothing, except be farther away sooner. But then you would have less data. And without data, warnings are weaker. This is the bargain. You get close enough to learn, but not so close you become part of the statistics. The lead says you were lucky the collapse volume was limited. A larger failure could have pushed a bigger wave. The geometry would still funnel it. The coasts would still be close. The only difference would be how far inland the sea decided to go. You picture those villages again? The resorts? The ports? You picture the narrow strip where so many people live. Because coasts are where food and trade are. You think about how the earth keeps building hazards right next to where humans insist on gathering. Not out of cruelty, out of indifference. You stand and walk a few steps because sitting still makes your thoughts louder. Down by the water, you see the harbor's surface continue to move, a slow oscillation, like the sea is rocking itself to sleep. But it is not sleep, it is just decay of energy, slowly fading. You look at the pilings and the lines again. Some boats have shifted, bumped, scraped. Minor damage, but it will cost someone money, time, repairs. Disasters have layers of consequence, not just death and survival. Also the quiet ruin of normal life. The lead calls you back inside because they want to package the report properly. They show you the drone footage again, now with annotations. The crescent scarp before the collapse. The moment of failure, captured as a dust plume and moving mass. The water bulge, the drawdown, the outgoing surge. They pause the video at the exact frame where the shoreline pulls back. They say, that is the warning people do not recognize. If the sea pulls away suddenly, do not go look. Run uphill, but people go look because curiosity is older than caution. The lead adds another annotation. The collapse direction relative to populated coasts. They explain that flank orientation matters. A landslide displaces water preferentially, sending most energy in the direction of motion. So, if the weak sector points toward a coast, that coast is in the line of fire. You think about how the volcano's shape is not symmetrical anymore. The new scar face points somewhere, and the volcano is already rebuilding on that face, adding loose layers, meaning the line of fire is being reloaded. You help the lead draft a brief explanation for officials. Simple language. A flank collapse is like dumping a truckload of rock into a bathtub. The water has to go somewhere. In a narrow strait, it goes fast, and it goes toward people. Then it bounces, returns, and keeps sloshing. Do not return to the shore after the first wave. Keep boats out of harbors until currents settle. It feels strange translating deep time processes into emergency bullet points. But that is the job. By the time your report is sent, the night is deeper. You step outside again, and the air tastes cleaner. Less ash, more salt. The plume is still there, faint but persistent. The island is a dark presence beyond the horizon's details. Occasionally, a dull orange flicker marks the vent. You can almost pretend it is a distant ship light. But ships do not throw ash. The lead joins you again, and they tell you something that sounds like a philosophical thought, but is also just geology. Volcanoes like this do not become safer after they fail. They become more unstable because the internal structure is disrupted. The collapse opens pathways, changes stress fields, and exposes hot material to water and air. It is a reset, not a resolution. You think about the instruments you left on the island, the seismometer, the GPS marker. They are still there. Maybe they are listening in the dark, buried in ash. If another collapse happens, they might vanish, or they might record the moment perfectly. Science is always asking machines to stand still while the Earth moves. Your phone vibrates with a message from someone on the team. They say, casualties are being reported now, numbers uncertain, missing people, injuries, damage. You read it, and you feel the emotional weight arrive late, like the sound of the collapse arriving after the movement. This is how humans process, slowly, after the physics is done. The lead tells you to rest when you can, because tomorrow will be logistics, instrument checks, new imagery, coordination with disaster management, maybe another boat trip, if conditions allow, maybe not. The island will be doing whatever it wants either way. You walk back toward your sleeping quarters, a simple room with a thin mattress and a fan. The fan hums and you hate it because it sounds like tremor. You lie down anyway. Your body is exhausted, but your mind keeps replaying the view of the water bulging outward, the shoreline retreating, the wave racing down the corridor. You keep hearing the roar of the moving flank. You keep smelling sulfur in the back of your nose. And you keep thinking about how close everything is in the Sunda Strait. Close enough that a local collapse can reach a beach in minutes. Close enough that warning systems struggle to beat water. Close enough that people keep living there anyway, because coasts are generous until they are not. In the dark, you remember the lead's earlier phrase, the island is reloading. You picture Anak Krakatau rebuilding its missing wedge with fresh spatter and ash. You picture waves undercutting the new deposits, grain by grain. You picture rain turning ash into slurry again, heavy and eager to slide. You picture gas moving through fractures, warming bands beneath the surface. You picture the next hairline crack lengthening quietly, and you realize the most unsettling part. The cycle does not require anyone to be watching. It repeats whether you take notes or not. You finally start to drift not into comfort, but into a tired acceptance. Then, somewhere near midnight, a distant sound pulls you back, a low rumble, barely audible through walls. You sit up, listening. It could be a truck on a road. It could be surf. It could be your mind refusing to let go. But the lead's voice from earlier returns, calm and practical in your memory. Do not trust quiet. Quiet can be a system changing modes. You stand, step outside, and look toward the sea again. The horizon is dark. The plume is still a faint